Hey everybody, Bob Ostrom, Creative Director for Tilt 365 with you today, and we are going to be talking about mindsets. Today I am joined by the Chief Science Officer of Tilt, Amanda Valone. Amanda, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
You're listening to Tilt 365.
Okay, so I've been hearing an awful lot about mindsets lately. In fact, you've written a couple of articles about mindsets. So what are they and why are they so important?
So mindsets are these fundamental beliefs and assumptions that people have usually like in the back of their head that influences how they interact with the world.
Okay.
So believing something like someone's personality doesn't change and this person's always going to be an extrovert, that's a type of mindset.
Right.
And it's important because it influences how you behave. So if you think I'm an extrovert, I always need to be around people, that's going to change, maybe where you live, the kinds of people you interact with, maybe the kind of job you have. So it's important to know about it because usually it's something that's, maybe in the back of your head or maybe something you don't discuss or really think about all the time, but it does influence how you behave kind of, day to day.
Right. Okay, got it. So I know a little something about mindsets. I know that there is a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset, but I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
So there are two types of mindsets in the most common mindset framework. So if you've heard the word mindset, you're probably referencing Carol Dweck and her colleagues' work. And when you talk about a fixed versus a growth mindset, it basically comes down to a belief in change. So with a fixed mindset, you believe whatever attribute or personality characteristic you're talking about is not changeable. But with a growth mindset, you believe that it can be changed. So if you take something like character strengths, maybe this person has no integrity. Someone with a fixed mindset would think that that person just fundamentally doesn't have integrity and never will. Whereas someone with a growth mindset would think, okay, that's something that can be changed. And if they want to, they could develop more integrity. And it's actually a little more nuanced than that too. Like no one fundamentally believes one side or the other for the most part. And they don't believe it about everything. Like you could think intelligence is fixed and there are smart people and there are dumb people, but you can think that extroversion is something that you can modify. And there's usually something in between, right? Like maybe I'm an extrovert at parties, but all the other days of the week I'm an introvert. So the general gist is your belief in whether or not something about you can change, and there's just a lot of little nuances in between.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So let's say that I'm operating with a fixed mindset. Is there a way I can change that? Can I change a fixed mindset to a growth mindset?
So you can definitely learn to recognize your mindsets and you can learn to change it to be more in line with what you want. So what I would probably do, and I'm sure it's not the only way to try to start recognizing some of your mindsets, is maybe work backwards. So a mindset is something that you really don't think about much, so it's kind of hard to see unless you look. But what you can notice is things like your behaviors and how you set goals. Your mindsets affect which goals you choose and what types of goals. So if you start to think, okay, what is it I'm going after? You can kind of use it to think back and think why.
Got it.
So for an example, if you have a goal to at your job just not look stupid and get everything done,
Okay.
that's kind of a goal of, okay, I'm avoiding looking stupid and just trying to get through my day. So I'm trying to avoid like not performing. If you think about why, is it because you think, okay, well, I just don't care about my job? That's one option, but probably the more likely one with respect to mindsets is something like, okay, I think if I don't perform, it means I fundamentally can't do my job. And I don't want to take any risks because if I fail, then I know I'm not good at my job.
Right.
If you have those kinds of thoughts, then you know that you have more of a fixed mindset. Because for people with a fixed mindset, failure means they're just not good enough. If you can't get better and you fail, then you just can't do it. So if you find yourself setting goals to try to just avoid failing and not because, it's something you don't care about, there are lots of things we probably don't care about and we don't need to focus on having a growth mindset or look into. But if you're focused on, I need to not fail, it might be because you think that if I fail, I can never come back. And that's one way to identify a fixed mindset. And then the second part was, how do you change it? Once you've identified your fixed mindset, and I'm assuming you want to go from fixed to growth and probably not the reverse.
Yes.
Like
I definitely want to go from fixed to growth.
You probably don't want to go backwards because even if you have a growth mindset, it's not something you have to pursue. I can think, one day I could be really good at the accordion and I just never have to learn. But if you've got a fixed mindset, I could think, I'm tone deaf and could never play the accordion. So it's probably better just to go in one direction. So once you've noticed that you have this fixed mindset, I guess the first place to start would probably be realizing whether it is something you can change. Like if you think I can be taller by next week, you're probably right to have the fixed mindset. But for a lot of things that people don't actually realize are changeable, you should, just go look it up and see. So something like intelligence, that's something that most people think is pretty fixed. It turns out it's not. There's like a nice range of where you can go. So people have, some degree of heredity, same thing for personality and most attributes. Some degree is inherited, but a lot of it is just your experiences and what you do with it. So, if you try to expose yourself to new ideas, if you try to learn new things, you're most likely going to learn. If you think that you can't be more intelligent or you don't think you can learn or change, you're going to avoid those things, and then you're definitely not going to. So to start changing your mindset, first you should probably prove to yourself, go look something up. If anybody, I have several references on personality, several references on intelligence. Those are things that are definitely knowledgeable and things that people tend to focus on. So first you need to convince yourself that those do change. And then once you do, you can start looking for ways to change them.
Okay, so we know it's possible for a person to have a certain mindset, but is it possible for my team or a group of people to have a collective mindset?
I'm not sure if it's really possible for a group or organization to have what I would call a mindset, because I'm not sure that they can have fundamental beliefs, but it's actually really in line with how most people define organizational climate and culture. Those are usually the same kinds of assumptions that we would think about an individual's mindset. So an organizational culture can encourage growth, or it can encourage just meeting like performance standards, and that's going to affect all the individuals in it. So yeah, I think an organization or just a team inside of an organization can probably have a culture that's very similar to a mindset.
Okay, got it. So that makes sense. Now, let's say that I'm a team leader and I want the individual members of my team to adopt a more positive mindset, or a more growth oriented mindset, I should say. What's the best way to do that?
So if you're a team leader who's trying to encourage a growth mindset in your team, first of all, you have to realize that you're setting the tone, and maybe your organization as a whole, but assuming that you have some degree of power over your team, then you're kind of setting the tone for what you want, and what you're going to get's going to be based basically on what you reward. If you pit people against each other and you have a really competitive culture and you tell people if they don't meet their deadlines, this is going to happen, you're going to encourage them to, even if they have a growth mindset, not act on it. So the mindset's kind of like where you start. You have to either believe that something is changeable or not, and then you can set a goal that reflects it. But even if I think, okay, my work performance can be a lot better, but my team leader says something like, well, if you don't meet this performance deadline, you're fired. I'm like, okay, well, I don't care if it can be better. I just need to meet this. And it's going to basically make me act like I have a fixed mindset, whether my mindset is actually fixed or growth. So as a team leader, the first thing you have to do is create a culture that allows people to kind of experiment and take risks within, a safe environment. If people aren't allowed to experiment and aren't allowed to fail a couple times, they're going to not want to take the risk in the first place. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is probably either just, have a discussion or maybe a more formal training and actually teach them about growth mindsets and teach them how to look into something like that.
Okay.
Because if they don't know it's there, they can't really do it. But if you create a culture within your team that doesn't allow them to act on it, they might as well have a fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, true. So at Tilt, we talk about 6 different mindsets. In fact, you actually co-wrote a blog post on the 6 different mindsets. I'm wondering if you can fill us in a little bit more in detail on what those mindsets are and how they work.
Yeah, so we have a fairly similar view of mindsets to what most people would think at Tilt, although it is just a little different. So it's similar in that we do think that there are fundamental assumptions and beliefs that influence people's behavior. But instead of having just 2, we have more of a spectrum of 6 different mindsets, going from the most rigid and closed off and protective to being really flexible and open and generative. So kind of the difference there, instead of believing that in the capability of change, it's focusing on whether in that moment we want to change or not. So we look at this with our 360 assessment and the positive influence predictor. So it's more about what's happening right now. So if I'm in a protective mindset, that means I'm being very closed off to input, and I'm kind of focusing on exactly what I need to do and not listening to anybody else, just not thinking, letting in new ideas at all. So if I'm in that kind of protective mindset, it can be because I think that that's what's right. I think that's the only thing. I don't think change is possible. And that would be close to what is a rigid mindset normally, as the normal mindset definition would go. But it could also be because I'm an accountant in a big organization that's about to get audited. And I think I don't need to be creative right now. And probably other people don't have great ideas that's other than how this math works. So it's more about choice in our mindsets. And I mean, some of it could be a lack of choice if you're not aware that they're there. But part of what we do is bring these mindsets up and make people aware of them so that they're more able to choose. And that's actually what the most flexible mindsets are. When you get up to an agile or generative mindset in our framework, it's actually going back and choosing between the other mindsets. Is this a time that I need to be open, or is this a time that I need to be closed? So our mindsets reflect more of a choice instead of kind of something in the back of your head that reflects behavior. So it can be chosen, but if you don't know it's there and you're not sure that there are mindsets, it's probably not something you're choosing.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for this interview today. This has been fascinating. Now, if I'm a listener and I'm thinking about, maybe I want to learn a little something more about mindsets, or even, how Tilt approaches mindsets, is there a place that they can go or something that they could read or look into for more information on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have several blogs on mindsets at our website that you can check out, and it goes into a lot more detail on some of the things that I've been talking about today. And it puts in some of the more primary research and the references to where I got this information. I'm not just making it all up. And if people are super interested, they're more than welcome to go to those links, look into the primary research, and then just keep digging in, published articles if they want to get into a lot of the fine details. But if they're interested in learning more about themselves personally, instead of jumping into the research, they can also take one of our assessments. So if you look at the positive influence predictor, it'll give you the results on your mindsets and how your mindsets are different across your different strengths and how you're showing up right now. And that's something that you can use to start increasing your self-awareness and cluing yourself into how others are seeing you and how you're interacting with people, so that you can recognize your mindsets and do what our mindsets allow you to do and choose and move between the mindsets so that you know the best way to look at each situation to get the outcome you want.
You've been listening to Tilt 365, strength-based personality assessments that grow people beyond a personality type.